Hello everyone, and welcome back once more to the Lost Wisdom of the Earth. Now, my guest today describes herself as a web weaver and facilitator of the reconnection of the hearts of people with the heart of nature. A co-founder of the Green Mountain Druid Order with her late partner Ivan Macbeth, she is committed to healing the earth one person and one place at a time. She is Fearn Lickfield. Fearn, welcome. Thank you so much. I know you've gone to a lot of trouble to be here.
It's good to be here. Yeah, I live up in the hills of Vermont where Wi-Fi is not necessarily so fast or reliable, but hopefully this will work out well and we'll be able to have a good connection.
Good stuff. Well, can we dive straight in and begin by just getting a bit of your background? I mean, how did you come to train to be a druid?
Well, I actually came into more of an eclectic sense of being a pagan at the time of I worked as an organic farmer for many years, and it's I feel like an appropriate entry point because it's what our ancestors were doing and how they were becoming more and more aware of the seasons and the cycles of nature and the way the plants were growing and the different times of seeding and planting and harvest. And so for me, it really had a lot to do with that, of just having my hands in the soil and paying attention to seasons and cycles and wanting to honor that, honor the different phases and cycles of the plants as well as the humans that were harvesting the plants. And so mostly it was by reading. But my very first farm mentor was a witch.
Yeah.
She sort of opened a lot of doors for me. And so that was a gift. And since then, I studied on my own as well as I actually started through witchcraft with a local coven. And then I came to Druidry actually because of meeting my dear husband, Ivan Macbeth, who came from England. I imported him. That's a long story of its own, but yes, so he came over and stayed with me in Vermont and set down roots here with me on this beautiful property that we are so blessed to steward, 70 acres on a hillside. And
wow.
So Ivan came as a druid already, and as I got to know him and to know more of his path, I realized, okay, so that's what you call it. It was just a feeling of rightness and homecoming for me.
Yeah.
I had actually already taken the name Fearn, or if you're Irish, it would be Fearn, with an A, F-E-A-R-N.
Yeah.
A couple of years before meeting Ivan, and not knowing that it was the Irish Ogham word, which is a really important part of our Druid connection to the trees. It's the word for alder tree in Irish Ogham. And so not knowing that at all, consciously, I chose a Druid name.
Yes.
And so that was a bit of a foreshadowing, I guess you could say. And then when Ivan came into my life, we were very much partners on many levels, not just love, but very much we had work to do together. We really, as soon as we met, were talking about running programs. And so when he came to Vermont, we started the Druid School within a year. And so I started as the administrator and, as he called me, the logistics goddess, and also a student because I had much to learn still for myself. And so wore a few different hats at first, and then was able to become more and more focused once I finished the training my own self to becoming more holding of the directing and the teaching of the school.
Yeah, so this is the Green Mountain Druid Order.
Yes, this is the Green Mountain Druid Order and the Green Mountain Druid School, and we're in our 13th year now, so we've been going on for a while.
Lucky 13.
Yes, lucky 13. It's a good year, even though, Ivan is sorely missed, so it's just about 2 years now that he passed away or passed over into spirit, and so he's very much still with us as an ancestor and set so much of the foundation for this school to be a success while he was alive, including writing a book in the last year of his life, which is now published.
Is it this one?
That's the one.
Yeah, I mean, you're down as a co-author with him as well for this.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's a super book. It really is. Absolutely super book. I mean, it's just so accessible and so easy to read and so easy to absorb what it's all about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's called, for everybody who didn't see that, it's called The Bardic Book of Becoming. And tell me a little bit about Druids and the Druid Order, because there are different levels to it, aren't there? And I'd like to go a bit later on to talk in more detail about the actual training you offer. But if you could just give me an overview of what it means to be a Druid and the different levels.
Yeah, so I think of it as an ancient and yet evolving path that is centered around our connection with the earth.
Yeah.
And not just the physical earth, but the earth that is the more subtle energetic relationship we have with the spirit of the earth and the spirit of places, as well as trees and all of the beings that we share this earth with.
Yeah.
And and the way that we run it, which is also, so Ivan came from Obad, so he has that background and he brought a lot of that inspiration and tradition into our school.
And Obad is the order of
Bards, Obates, and Druids.
Yeah.
So he was trained in England before he came to Vermont, and then when we started the school, he incorporated some of the sort of framework that Obad gave him with a lot of his own wisdom and understandings from a lot of years of study on his own all around the world. He was a world traveler, so he brought in a lot of different traditions and eclecticism, and then my own understandings and teachings have also filtered in. So, but we hold that framework, which is the Bard, the Obate, and the Druid. So those are the three levels of study.
Yeah.
And so in our school, we have 1 year related to each, although we also do the correspondence, which is self-paced. And so each of those has a very different sort of theme, but they're also overlapping and very connected. And the Bard is the being who uses the power of their word in creative endeavors. It can be poetry, singing, storytelling, song, ways of, working with instruments or dance. It's very much about contacting the divine inspiration, which is known as Awen, A-W-E-N. This is a very sacred principle and concept for Druids. So it's not just about being creative. It's actually creativity is seen as sacred, and the act of creating.
So it's that inspirational energy.
Yes, very much sort of accessing that. And, we see it coming both from above and below. And then accessing in that and bringing that through our human expression and creating the world. That's how we create the world, is through our words, through our actions, through our creative endeavors. And so it's a little different from how the bards of old approached it, but it's what we're always listening to. And this is why I say evolving path. It's like we have to be listening to how is it that we can be a Druid today? How is it that I can be a Druid in Vermont, which is very different from perhaps how you might be a Druid in England. And because it's a different land base, and the land is what we're listening to. Yes, and the land does speak differently in different places. And I think that's one of the things I love so much. I've talked with various students. In fact, I've been very tempted to actually pick up the training myself. And I think I probably will at some stage when I've got a little more time on my hands. It's such a broad church. It just is. It's open and it's welcoming and it's encompassing and it's not prohibitive, is it? No, it's not. There's I think a lot of people are drawn to Druidry because they don't like trying to fit themselves into boxes.
Well said.
So the way that we approach it, some people say it's a religion, some say it's a spiritual path, some say it's a philosophy, and I basically say yes, all that, whatever works for you. And we don't ask you to be honoring or respecting or worshiping a particular deity or not. You can be a Christian and be a Druid. We do have some Christian students. And so it's really a lot about how can we interpret this that feels authentic for ourselves. And with that sort of like foundational idea of like, well, what does it mean to be a Druid in this land? So it's a lot about really listening to the earth and listening to what spirit is guiding us to be and become, and how to be a good steward. So there are some guiding principles, and then there's a lot of room for interpretation.
Yeah, so you've got wriggle room, as I call it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So you've talked about the bard. What about the ovate?
Yeah. So the ovates, in our training, the ovate work has a lot more of an internal approach. It's very much a process of personal discovery and transformation, taking them through several different kinds of initiations. And for example, this coming weekend, the ovates will be digging their own graves and going through shamanic death and rebirth.
Wow.
And they've done a lot of preparation to get to this point. So there's a lot of internal process work for really like working through your shadows, working through your wounding, both, in this lifetime and ancestral wounding.
Yeah.
Learning also alongside of that some of the important support systems for gaining wisdom and support and guidance through that process. So we work a lot with the trees. So the OM, as I mentioned earlier, the OM system for divination, and also essences, and working with the woods of trees for wands. So we're working with the trees at a variety of levels as we also sort of go through our own transformational process, so that they're really holding space, rooting us, and helping us remember what it means to be really true humans.
Yeah.
The trees are close kin for us, and they really remind us a lot about how to run our energy and how to stand tall and how to be a bridge between the earth and the sky.
Yeah. And yet we are so unappreciative at every level, it strikes me. The way people treat trees, or walk past them, ignore them, cut them down without a second thought. And yet, as you say, yes, we Michael Dunning, I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. He's talked wonderfully about the yew trees, and it just makes you, realize there's a whole level of being that we've disconnected ourselves from.
Yeah. And so it's a lot about remembering. It's a lot about remembering and pulling all of our pieces back together to become whole again. And that means also not just being human. It means being tapped into a larger web of life, because we're not, I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted also by saying this, but it's a lot about remembering the fact that, we're connected to everything. Yes. And everything we do affects everything else. And we're not separate. And it's through thinking we're separate that we have done the damage we've done. So it's a remembering of our place in the web that is crucial to us really being able to survive.
Yeah. And it's been said again and again and again and again, and yet still we're in the state we're in. So the question is, how can we wake more people up?
Well, we're doing it, aren't we?
With any luck, we are. Yes, it's through things like this. And it's one of the speakers made a very good point. And I thought this was, it's so obvious and so simple, and yet it's something that a lot of us don't do. We kind of keep ourselves to ourselves, and we talk in our own little groups. We talk to the converted a lot of the time, but it's actually, we've got to talk as if this is normal, talking to trees, talking to plants, connecting with late nature spirits, connecting with the consciousness of Mother Earth. This is normal. This is every day. And we need to speak about it with the people who think it's odd, and make them understand that actually not doing it is the odd bit.
Right. Yeah. So making ripples, and
yes.
I do think that each person that we teach goes out, whether it's to their children or their workplace people, even if they don't know how to speak about it as well, they're bringing an energy that's different.
Yes.
And I do believe that those ripples are happening, and we do need to meet that critical mass of shifting consciousness, and I do also believe that's happening. Whether it's happening fast enough, I'm not sure. My fingers are crossed.
It's one of the reasons for this summit, is to try to sort of move that up the agenda a little, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah. So all of the ways that we can send out good understanding and wisdom, and to educate, and to also connect, so education is wonderful, but it's got to include more of the embodied understanding as well as
it's not just not just head, it's got to be cell tissue, hasn't it? I mean, this is work you do in your in your cells, not in your head.
Right.
Your heart.
We are animals, after all. We have 5 senses, and we have more than 5 senses, but the 5 senses are a really terrific way to start.
Yes, absolutely. So the ovate level, from what you're saying, there's a lot of self-development work there, a lot of reconnecting with self. It's coming back to the authentic you, taking away the shadow, the masks, the
peeling away, and you know, the metaphor is there's actually a journey at the beginning of entering a chrysalis, and so the whole time that we're going through that ovate process, we're in the chrysalis, and eventually, when we're ready to become druids, we come out and we find our wings.
Yes, you become the butterfly. You mentioned initiation, that there are several initiations in this. Now that really takes us back into, you know, all the ancient wisdom schools, the ancient history schools and things like this, because initiation was a very, very important part of the process of becoming wise, wasn't it? Of understanding how the world worked.
Right.
So yes, so can you just, for people who aren't really too aware with what that means, can you give us a little bit of information or insight into, you know, the importance of initiation and the sort of thing it might entail?
Absolutely. Yeah, so initiation, it's a beginning, right? To initiate is to start something, and you know, in different traditions it's done differently, but how we do it is that at the beginning of each of the grades there is an initiation, and it's partly about commitment. It's partly about being really clear, being asked some questions, and then being really clear about what you're stepping into. And literally, it's often the way we work with it is stepping through some kind of gateway, a portal, and it's a one-way portal. You don't turn around and come back the other way. You don't come back so you got to be clear that this is what you want, you know, and of course,
because everything changes.
It does. Yes, you're committing yourself, and you're committing to your spirit. You're committing to yourself that you're ready for this journey, whatever it entails. And a lot of times it does bring up a lot of obstacles and challenges, and that's part of the deal. Is like, can you stay committed and dedicated no matter what shows up? And we're there to support them in staying with it and supporting them through the obstocals and the challenges, because that's all part of the journey.
Yeah.
And so
now that you know, I'm a great, I really believe that it's the obstacles, it's the challenges that create a backbone, you know, that kind of strength within us to do the work that needs to be done and to face it. So actually not crumbling at the first hurdle is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, from a spiritual point of view, if you're not up to doing the work, then you're no good to Mother Earth, whoever it might be.
Yeah, it does take
spirit,
commitment, it takes dedication, and you know, those obstacles are the places where we grow most, you know.
Yes.
And I certainly learned that by losing my husband, and how intense that was for me and many others, but also how much I've grown because of it, because it didn't break my heart, it cracked it open.
Yes.
And there's more capacity now for me to love. There's more capacity for me to give. And it's also because he's got my back at every step, you know, he's there.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I did, because Ivan is still extremely dedicated as an ancestor to all of his students, I was guided to create a crown that is, it's actually got antlers. This is something that he wanted, and these antlers were given to him by a friend. And so I created this beautiful antler crown that goes on the head of each person in their initiation process, and it's a way that Ivan can come in and bless them before they step through the gateway.
Yes.
And each student that receives his blessing is then supported by him as long as they're committed. And so it's a beautiful thing to have like this physical human support as well as the ancestral support through this process, because it does bring up stuff, and we need a lot of support right now as humans. There's a lot we're going through.
It's a very challenging time.
Yes.
And, and I mean, I see a lot of people resisting. There's you know, big changes coming through, and I see a lot of people resisting it, and the suffering lies in the resistance, really. You know, the change is coming whether we will or no, so we might as well flow with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be scary.
It can be very scary, yes. And again, I'm hoping that summits like this will help, you know, more people to understand what's going on, because I think when you have an understanding, it becomes easier to kind of hold your center, as it were, within it.
Yeah, and to also know that you're not alone. You know, it's like people who are drawn to these paths often feel very odd
Yes.
and weird, like nobody gets me.
Out of step with those around them.
Yeah, and so that can cause a lot of frustration and sadness and just feeling disconnected and isolated. And so it's so important to find others of like mind and heart. You know, it's wonderful to also be able to share this wisdom with everybody around us, and we need to also have people that we feel safe with to go to those deep places, and to know also that like together we can really make a difference. There's something that happens when a circle of people with magical intent forms and does work together that is larger than, you know, the sum of the parts.
Yeah, very, very, very true. Yeah. And magic, you use the word magical, and it is magic, isn't it, of the best sort. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the ovates. Okay, the next step into the Druid.
The third level is the Druid, and so that training really is got a couple different themes. One is in our school, and I can only really speak for our school. All Druids are different, so I just want to say that, like, there is not one kind of Druid in the world. There are many kinds of Druids in the world, and I think that diversity is healthy. That's good. So I'm definitely not the one saying like, this is how Druids should be. I am the one saying, be how you want to be, as long as you're following the spirit of Druidry, you know, like, and how that needs to be informed through your own knowingness and your own spirit.
So when you say the spirit of Druidry, how would you sum that up?
Oh gosh, words. Yeah, it's something that I can tap into, and it feels ancestral. It feels like it's also connecting into the ancestral lands. So like, you know, the British Isles, when I tap into that older spirit that my ancestors walked, and also my own soul walked in another time, it's that spirit that is very ancient and holds that deeper connection with place and with the traditions that came from that place. That's what I'm talking about. And I might not necessarily get a lot of the detail about the what and the who and the how, but it's more of a feeling of alignment when I'm connecting into that space. So it's a subjective thing, but it's real.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the Druid level, the two main themes that we work with are geomancy. So geomancy being that, you probably talked with Graham about this.
Yes, Graham Gardner.
Yes. Different geomancer is going to explain themselves differently. But my understanding, geomancy is really about how, there's a little overlap happening. How do we relate with the spirit of place? And how do we learn to be good stewards and to respond to what we find there, you know, and actually leave it better than we found it. That's basically what it's about, and really learning how to listen and then to respond.
So really deepening our relationship with the land.
Go ahead.
And deepening our relationship with the land.
And our capacity to help heal, to balance, to clear whatever is happening there. So that's one thing. It's just skill building and awareness building, working with dowsing, working with earth acupuncture, creating sacred space, all of that good stuff gets built in. And so it's really about stepping into that. And Ivan would talk about the Druid is the one who becomes a walking sacred space. And I love that. Walking sacred space.
Yeah.
So it's really about holding that in our hearts.
Yeah, that sounds like that's embodying. That's really embodying the teachings. Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other piece of the Druid grade is working with a particular deity, and again, we let the deities choose the people. It's not usually the other way around.
So how does that work?
Really working to connect deeply with a particular deity. Well, we provide a variety of opportunities to make that connection. A lot of it happens in journey, and so guided journeys is to see who comes.
Yeah.
And then, for each student to explore and research that and understand more and more about that being, in order that they can basically bring that divine essence through themselves, because ultimately understanding that we are divine and that these deities are bringing something divine into us as humans, and then bringing that outward into the world. And how does that show up in a larger capacity in our communities and in our work in the world, and our purpose in life.
Yeah, it sounds like there's the potential for some surprises to come through there.
Yeah. Oh yes, we've had lots. Yeah.
Fascinating. So when someone's gone through the 3 levels of training, what next? Is there more, or is it just then about, life is a journey, as they say, it's just about keep deepening the experience?
Yeah, it really, 3 years is, in the larger scheme of things, not a very long time at all. And to us, there's just so much to this. And ultimately, we're doing a lot of introducing of topics and understandings. And what we hope is that the people will grab onto the ones that really resonate and then go deep. And we would talk about like creating a living library, so like maybe this person's really excited about the divination system, and this person's really excited about other form of healing, or this person really wants to work with the elementals, and so that people can really go deep into the things that they're excited about and come back. In our school we bring back our graduates as guests and teachers, and try and keep folks as active as they want to be in the community with, public ceremonies and ways that we can, bring the magic to the larger world.
Yeah, you talked about, you just mentioned public ceremonies. Do you find there's any resistance to this? Because at one stage, you and I would have been strung up as witches, wouldn't we? Basically. Yeah. So yes, and I know there is. There, in some communities still there's a lot of unease around so-called pagan, heathen, whatever you want to call it, way of working. People misunderstand it.
Yeah. Yes, and I am lucky to live in a part of the world where, for the most part, it is very safe and actually welcome in our public spaces. We do our summer and winter solstices on the shore of Lake Champlain, where there's a public stone circle that Ivan helped build. And it's a beautiful space where the sun sets over the mountains on the other side of the lake. And so we've been doing summer and winter solstice there for, I think it's been 12 years now, and have never had a problem. And they've been big. Sometimes there are a couple hundred people come out for them. And so, and people are just excited to come together and celebrate seasons, and it's just so natural. How can you argue with that?
Yes. Well,
I suppose you can.
Yeah. Well, that cycle, it was absorbed into the church, wasn't it, and made into sort of feast days or saints days or whatever it might be. So that cycle still exists. It's just been dressed up in different clothing. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's getting back to the roots of it. Taking off the fancy dress, as it were. Yeah. You do. You yourself, sort of do a lot of things, amongst them ecstatic dance. Can you tell us a little about that? Because I love the sound of that.
It is extremely,
it sounds joyful.
fun. Yeah. So it is so loosely following the 5 rhythms model, which is also known as the wave by a lady named Gabrielle Roth, who developed this beautiful form. And it really, again, is very loose. It's what I do as mainly as the DJ and the space holder is just to create a playlist that follows, the music follows these 5 different rhythms. And it's known also as a wave because you can sort of, it starts slow and builds up to a climax and then comes back down the other side like a wave. And it's like a transformational cycle that you go through the movement, the music, and the rhythm. And it can be very spiritual. It's part of the way that I work spiritually is through dance as a way of sort of going into connection with different beings and getting information. It can also just be extremely therapeutic for just moving through whatever you need to move through and shake it off. And just a lot of fun too. And if you like to move your body and if you love good music, well, that's also subjective. What's good music? But I like it. But I like a lot of, it's mostly instrumental from around the world, lots of different cultures and music that just makes your body want to move, lots of percussion and good beats. Yeah.
And again, this is
I do that every Friday night here.
Yeah, it's tapping into I mean, the likes of the Sufis in their twirling, they use that, and it's a means of reaching the divine. You see it with the African tribes and their dancing and drumming and things like that. It's the way of taking you out of your body and experiencing something bigger than yourself.
Or at least out of your head. Some people just want to get into their body. Other people want to get beyond their body. So
that's a brilliant point, actually, because most of us live in our head and actually forget, we're kind of like numb from here down, aren't we?
Yeah. So getting to the full body is also extremely therapeutic.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the things you say are that you love magic and ritual, and you love making up rituals and things. So can you give us a bit of insight into that?
Yeah, any excuse for a good ceremony.
This is the thing that comes over. It's just fun. It's fun.
Yes, it is. It's fun. It should be fun, and it can also be extremely powerful. And again, it's like whether I'm doing it solo or doing it in a group of people, it's coming usually from a need or an inspiration. And sometimes both. And so, for example, I am a deep lover and devotee of the waters. And so sometimes I will do a ceremony for a river, especially one perhaps that has had some pollution or toxicity added to it recently. I love doing rites of passage. That's another passion for me, is just recognizing those passages in the people around me and encouraging them to honor them and supporting them and honoring them in different creative ways.
Yeah, could we maybe expand on that a little, because that's one of the things we've lost very much as a society, and they are important. Again, they're gateways, they're initiation.
There's a lot more than we even realize necessarily. So there's obviously that big one at adolescence when our ancestors would have gone through a rite to become adult and maybe get a new name. And then,
and where do you place that, out of interest? Where do you place that? Because obviously the age of becoming an adult is different from society to country to country, but also, just because somebody says, oh, you've reached 18, you're an adult now, doesn't actually mean to say you really are, does it? I mean, some are adults.
Yeah, I think there's subtleties. There's subtleties within that. So, there's obviously an important passage for women becoming girls when they get their first moon. It's not as obvious for the boys becoming men. And I do think that their maturation process is takes a little longer. In general, these are generalities, of course. And so that theirs might be a little later than like 13 or 12 when the girls, that's not womanhood. That's just sexual maturity, which is a different thing. And, so different cultures will have different ways of understanding that. And So yeah, the obvious physical change of the body is one thing, and then there's other levels of recognizing when something internal is shifting, where you're stepping more into, for example, like graduating from high school, or finishing some kind of training where you're now beginning a new career, or having your first baby. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Or becoming an empty nester. This is happening to people around me, and there's no passage for what happens when there's no longer children to raise, and suddenly you've got all this life energy left, and you're thinking, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And
like I
yeah.
see a few women who they end up not handling it well, and almost the rest of their life becomes a wasteland, which is awful, because there's no acknowledgement or no helping them through it, no structure to help them through it.
Right. Yeah. And then the losing, I had an astrologer tell me once, you don't fully become adult until both your parents have died, and there's no longer, you're the top generation, and you become the top generation. And there is something to that. I have seen that with people who have lost both parents, and there's nobody older to go talk to than yourself, and you are now the elder on some level. And so it's so that's a passage.
Yeah, a big one, actually.
Yeah. So yeah, there's so many. Oh, my battery's telling me it's getting low. Crap. So I'm wondering if there is a cord here. I'm at my friend's house, so I'm wondering if there's anything I can find to plug in. I'm sure there is. It's a matter of finding it.
Yeah.
How much time do you think we still have?
Well, we can wrap things up quickly if you want, and then another day, if you want to sort of talk further, we can do a podcast and take it out further.
Okay.
I know this has all been, it's not easy when you're not at your own place, and yes, we had difficulties, just to let people know, we had difficulties getting the computer to work properly, which is why we're on your phone. So yeah, well, let me say to you very quickly, in the time that your phone has left, is there anything that you really feel you want to sort of say to people that you haven't said, or talk about how to contact you or take up the training maybe?
Sure. Yeah. Just to say that, I feel like Druidry is one of those things that it's something that is going to call to you, or it's not. And if you feel that call, if it something resonates in your soul, then definitely take it up, because there's a real power that can happen when we step onto a path that's both ancient and new to us. And so just to say, there's lots of wonderful Druid orders out there, and we also do offer an online course as well as the Vermont-based training, which is on my land here in Worcester, Vermont. It starts a new program every spring, and then the online one is self-paced and can start anytime. We're actually in the middle of reformatting that because of Ivan's book coming out. There's so much interest that we ran out of mentors, and so we're looking at some different ways of supporting our students. And so we're going to be launching something this fall or winter, but people can get the first chapter online on my website for free, and that gets your email into my list so that you'll get updates about the new program that we're working on launching soon.
Well, that's wonderful. I'll make sure that your website
it's one of many paths. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make sure the website's up, and also the name of the book, and then people can contact you, because, as you say, it's such an inclusive way of living, and it's such a harmonious way of living. Being in touch with Mother Nature, and it's something that we all need at the moment. Badly. Yes, the world would be a better place if we were all Druids, wouldn't it? More tolerant, maybe. Before your battery dies on us,
thank you for the opportunity to share with you.
Well, I just so appreciate the fact that you've gone to quite some trouble to make the space for this, so I really appreciate it. And yeah, everybody listening, I hope that you've sort of been inspired, and I hope that you've got a greater understanding about what it means to be a modern day Druid, because it's very much for our times, and what we need going forwards. And yes, I can't, as I said, I can't thank you enough, Fearn, for making the time. So thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome.
And before your battery dies on us, I shall say good night to everyone, and I will see you again tomorrow with another speaker. Thank you.
Have a good day.